The University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill is the greatest athletic college in history. Don't believe me? Let me tell you why. So, before we can actually establish who the greatest athletic school of all time is, we have to go over the criteria to meet that standard. First things first, though, we have to establish that every NCAA Division I sport will be accounted for, well, at least the mass majority of them, which we will get to in a minute. So let's now talk about these three categories. The first of which is going to be championships. Championships are very important in establishing these rankings here, so that's why they're coming in at number one. Number two is the alumni, players who have came through past your program and went back to do great things at the next level. Number three is overall success, total win percentage and wins, overall success from season to season of your program is what we're factoring into this category. So let's get started with the infamous Carolina basketball. The UNC basketball program is one of the greatest that the sport has to offer. Carolina basketball has been dominant for pretty much all of its existence, and although it's been a little bit slow as of late, I think it will be back on top very, very soon. Led by Dean Smith and Roy Williams, this team has one of the greatest programs that basketball has to offer. What you see on the screen is UNC basketball's resume, including 6 national championships, debatably 7, 5 runners ups to the national champion, 20 Final Fours, which is the most all time, along with a boatload of Elite Eights and Sweet 16s and tournament appearances overall, second most conference titles in ACC history, and the most by far regular season championships at 41. This is a list of the teams with the most national championships all time in basketball. As you can see, North Carolina is currently sitting at number 3 all time behind UCLA and Kentucky with 6. 7 debatably if you want to go back to like basically ancient times. But UCLA and Kentucky are just ahead of them with their fairly old titles, to be quite honest with you, carried by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton. Now that we've covered the championships for North Carolina basketball, let's take a quick look at what we have for the overall winning percentage. As you can see on the screen, North Carolina is currently third all time in overall wins in program history, and they've been around the second shortest amount of time of any team on this list since their first season playing basketball. And if you look at the winning percentage, second all time, only trailing Kentucky at .735. Now let's get into the alumni part of the conversation, which honestly might be the most impressive over all the championships. So let's get it started with the greatest basketball player in history, Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, look at this resume. Hall of Famer, 14-time All-Star, greatest of all time, 6-time NBA champion with 5 MVP awards, Rookie of the Year, All-NBA. Michael Jordan has done it all. And he is not the only alum to come from UNC basketball. Look at this star-studded list. Consisting of 98 players, UNC basketball has just put an absolute show in the NBA with 8 Hall of Fame inductees so far: Billy Cunningham, Bob McAdoo, James Worthy, Michael Jordan, Phil Ford, Charlie Scott, Sam Perkins, and Antoine Jamison, with very shortly Vince Carter joining them, is just an incredible list of players, including a few number one overall picks, all-time greats, so many all-star appearances, and let's not forget 5 Hall of Fame coaches as well. Moving on from the greatest basketball program of all time, let's go on to UNC football. UNC football, not as prolific and well known as the UNC basketball program, but it is nothing to be messed around with. And let me tell you, it's pretty impressive the things that this team has accomplished and put into the NFL. Here's a list of the most winningest football programs in college history. And there's North Carolina, sitting at tied for 40th all time, which actually is not too bad when you factor in that a lot of these Ivy League schools and non-Division I schools are factored in. When you take those out, North Carolina comes in at 29th, tied for at least all time, which is pretty impressive when you factor in that this is a football predominant school. Now, let's talk about alumni, which again is really, really good. And I think will surprise some of you guys. Let's start out with Lawrence Taylor. You could argue that Lawrence Taylor is the greatest defensive football player of all time, one of only two defensive players to ever win the MVP award, 10-time Pro Bowler, Hall of Famer, 8-time All Pro, 2-time Super Bowl champ. I mean, he's done it all. Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year. Lawrence Taylor has been fantastic in his time in the NFL, and he is a UNC alum, arguably making that the second player that is the greatest of all time in two sports that went to Carolina. That is just insane to think about. And yes, obviously, I'm not saying Lawrence Taylor is the greatest football player of all time. We all know that Tom Brady is the GOAT. But when we're talking about defensive side of the ball, I think it's hard to argue that Lawrence Taylor is not the greatest to ever do it. Now let's look at some of the other notable alumni to come from UNC. The University of North Carolina has put 230 players on NFL fields. 252 players have been drafted out of UNC, which is just absolutely incredible. 28 of which are currently playing in the NFL, including two Hall of Famers. And not to mention as well, Sam Howell's coming, and this program has been reinvigorated, so this number is only going to keep increasing. As I will pause for a second to let you guys continue to look at the rest of this list. Now let's move on to both men and women's UNC soccer. The soccer program at UNC is another that has just had an absolutely incredible program just for so many years. Getting started, I guess we'll go with the men's first. UNC men's soccer has two national championships, along with a runner up to the national championship, a lot of NCAA tournament appearances, pretty much making it most every year. Conference championships at 3 total. The fact that UNC has two national championships, and that's one of the lower totals that we're going to have on this list, is very, very crazy. One very famous alum that I want to mention from UNC Soccer's program is Greg Berhalter. He is currently the coach of the U.S. men's national team in soccer. Yes, the coach of the men's national team went to UNC. And now let's get on to the women's soccer, which is even more insane. UNC women's soccer is far and away, not even close, the greatest program the NCAA has. UNC soccer women's side has been crazy good for basically forever. Look at this info I have for you right here. 21 national championships, which is 18 more than the team in second place. UNC soccer is just absolutely dominant. Look at this chart right here. Obviously, I just said all the national championships, and that's also with 5 runner-ups, a whole bunch of semifinals and appearances, conference championships galore. It's absolutely insane what UNC women's soccer has been able to do. And look at this list of accomplishments from players that have attended UNC and what they've done. If you pretty much want to just copy and paste the U.S. women's national team, a lot of it's Carolina, and that's been like that for a very large amount of time. And not to mention, Mia Hamm is the greatest women's soccer player of all time. And you know where she went to college? She went to the University of North Carolina, guys. It's just crazy. It's insane. Mia Hamm is the third Tar Heel to be considered the greatest at their sport, in my opinion. Let's go ahead and talk about UNC men's lacrosse. UNC men's lacrosse, I know it may be getting repetitive to you guys, but they're good. They're very good. One of the greatest programs of all time at the sport. There's just no other way to say it. Look at this. 5 national titles for the UNC men's lacrosse program, which comes in at 5th all time only behind a select few amount of teams. They've been so good, there's no other way to say it. Let's go ahead and move on to women's lacrosse, who have also been very just incredible throughout their time at Carolina. Two national championships on the women's side, which also comes in at fifth all time. So if you want to just pretty much just say that Carolina lacrosse is the fifth greatest program of all time, I'm not going to argue with you. I think that'd be very fair to say. Another program that's just been so good, and it's really impressive. Now on to UNC field hockey, which is a women's sport. There is no men's field hockey, but women's field hockey for UNC is arguably the greatest program of all time. Tied for first all time in championships at 9 overall, with Old Dominion and one ahead of Maryland. You could argue one or two for the greatest program of all time, but I think they're currently on like a three-peat. The argument for greatest of all time for UNC field hockey is definitely there. UNC women's basketball. Now, everyone talks about the men's program as one of the greatest of all time, which is definitely 100% true. The women's basketball doesn't get talked about so much, but they do have a national championship under their belt from 1994, as well as 3 overall Final Four appearances, conference titles, regular season titles are all there. And so overall, this is a really good program, a really strong program for UNC women's basketball. It's no UConn or anything. I'm not going to argue that it is, but fantastic is UNC women's basketball. UNC baseball. UNC baseball, unfortunately, is probably the least impressive, I'd have to say, program on this list. And even with that said, they are not too shabby of a program. Alumni wise, there are some great players who went on to do great things in the MLB that attended the University of North Carolina. But looking at the championships here and overall success, College World Series, 2 runner-ups to the College World Series, and appearances. They have a great history, honestly, when it comes to the College World Series. They have 11 total appearances there, with a lot of overall NCAA tournament appearances and a ton of conference championships as well. So, with all that said, this being maybe the weakest program, with all this still accomplished, it's crazy to think about. UNC baseball also has a pretty impressive list of alumni to go along with it. Brian Roberts being the most notable, being a multi-year All-Star, along with some current, now MLB future stars in the league, 68 total overall players. So that's going to be all for the sports that we're going to be covering in this video, talking about who the greatest athletic school of all time is. And so, to finally wrap up this video, I have to go over some of the competition that UNC was facing, and there is some legit competition, but I truly believe that UNC is the greatest of all time. But the first school that we're talking about is Stanford. Stanford is really good in the individual type sports, talking swimming, tennis, those type things, in which they are really good at getting those championships done. But as far as overall success and alumni goes, I think Carolina does have them beat in those categories, meaning they are not going to be crowned the greatest sports school of all time. The second and probably least likely to be known is USC. Now, USC does have a lot of accolades and is definitely in the top 5 of athletic schools of all time, but pretty much everything, championships, overall success, and alumni factor, Carolina's got them beat there in every category. And the final team, and probably the biggest competition, is UCLA. The second school out of Los Angeles in this video is UCLA, and they've got a lot of accomplishment. I'm not going to lie, got some good alumni as well. But, I mean, when you're talking about Carolina having 3 of the greatest of their sport of all time, all going to Carolina, it's just too impressive for me to say that they're better. And UCLA also doesn't have quite the success of late to be really considered for this crown. So overall, I do to throw all those 3 competition in the trash and say Carolina is the greatest athletic school in history So, guys, I would like to thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate you guys watching it all the way through and hearing my explanation as for why Carolina is the greatest athletic school of all time. And I'd love to hear your opinion on the matter. Is Carolina the greatest athletic school of all time, in your opinion? Feel free to disagree with me on this issue. I'd love to hear you guys' opinion in the comments down below. Please share this video with your friends. It took a lot of work. I really appreciate that. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.